Almost every major release when it comes to brand is just a minor tweak to its previous generation. Some new innovations often is included. Design is usually changed in small increments. And it may seem there's really no revolutionary changes in the industry as you look at some of the major brands. But if you zoom out to the last 15 years, there were 5 brands out there that had significant changes since 2009, and I'm going to tell you all about it. The most obvious pick is Tudor. Tudor is most obvious because the changes that have taken place in the last 15 years with this brand as a whole have been absolutely tremendous. And it's not just because they're doing unbelievable stuff today, it's also because they were in a pretty dark place 15 years ago. Let's start with the fact that back then Tudors weren't even sold in the United States. Of course, that was still an era of the Tudor Hydronaut era before the black bays and the stuff that we all love today. And back then, every Tudor actually used to be assembled in Rolex, while today they have their own dedicated manufacturer where they manufacture their own watches and stand alone without being sort of like, all right, look, I put my Rolexes together, let me throw some Tudors together as well, right? So it was that cheaper Rolex, if you will. That's what we always dubbed them. Oh, with Tudor, oh, you want a cheaper Rolex? Try a Tudor, you'll save a few $1,000s. Fast forward to today, Tudor is fully established as its own brand. It's no longer that cheaper Rolex. There are plenty of Tudor collectors out there. There are plenty of people out there that will prefer Tudor over Rolex. Why? They do a sporty modern take with like this vintage vibe. You still get all of the quality of Rolex, or now I should say Tudor, I shouldn't continue comparing that to Rolex, and you do get that vintage vibe that's just so much cleaner with a bit of that modern take, and I feel that that's what sinks to collectors today. Also, let's not forget that Tudor's lineup now includes a ton of master chronometers, right? They're not just some cheapy watch. These are master certified chronometers. Accuracy-wise, they run the same 0 to 5 seconds, much like Rolex, and they can resist up to 15 Gauss of magnetic fields. With their black bays and their Paligos, I think it's fair to say that Tudor is full force going after that Omega market, and I think they may succeed in actually beating Omega out. Give it another 5 to 10 years, if Tudor goes ahead of Omega. Well, again, depends on what Omega is going to be doing this whole time as well. That certainly looks like that may be their plan. And last but not least, some Tudor watches out there actually have wait lists. This would be laughable 10 years ago. Somebody told me I have to wait for a Tudor. They were so readily available, discounted brand new right out of the gate. But guess what? Today there are wait lists for certain Tudors. Cartier. Now, Cartier is one of the top luxury brands in the world. This isn't exactly a new development. What do you think of when you think of Cartier? You think jewelry first and foremost, not watches. If you think about it, go back in history, they have some of the most notable contribution to the world of watches. Let's talk about the Cartier tank, right? The tank was so influential that any watch that's made out there today in that rectangle shape is referred to as a tank watch, or tank shaped, right? That's how influential the tank was. And let's not forget the fact that the Santos was the first men's wristwatch openly marketed to men. Not a small feat. So it may seem odd that, we're putting Cartier at number 2 as the most improved watches in the last 15 years, but it was inevitable, and I'll tell you why. Now look, back in 2009 or 15 years ago, Cartier wasn't exactly smoking hot. They had a huge lineup of quartz watches. Their watches tended to be looked at as more like jewelry rather than timepieces, especially by men. But there was a select group of individuals that took their mechanical pieces and they appreciated them in terms of the quality of those particular movements. Like I said, a few. And this was around the time where the in-house movement craze began, 2010, I believe, and Cartier comes out with the caliber 1904 MC. This was a significant first step, and the reputation from there on started to grow and grow at a pretty big pace. The catalog evolved into more complicated pieces. They've gotten away from a lot of the quartz models they used to make because, again, with the quartz model, they were selling jewelry. Let's double jewelry. And of course, in 2018, the revamped Santos de Cartier lineup really took them to the next level and increased their popularity among buyers. And then let's not forget about the skeleton watches. They are in huge demand when it comes to Cartier. In fact, we sell a ton of Cartier Santos, specifically the skeletons. And last but not least, I never thought that shoppers would actually ask me, what should I get, a Rolex or Cartier? That would be a question 15 years ago that would never be asked. It would be unheard of. But today, that's really the reality. It's a pleasant surprise, and really I am happy. A house that first put a watch on a man's wrist certainly is deserving of this type of recognition and popularity, as well as the improvement we saw over the last 15 years. Let's go to Breitling, and I don't even have to go back 15 years. Around 2016, 17, Breitling was barely in the top 20 selling watches. But by 2023, in a short 6 years, they were already in the top 10. And sometimes it takes an individual. And that individual was Georges Kern, who took over as CEO in 2017. This guy's been making great decisions ever since he took over. Some will argue that Breitling was on an upswing going back to 2009 or 15 years when they came out with their beloved in-house movement, the B01 Chrono. But what the current era did is they toned down Breitling. Think of these huge, humongous sports pieces. Remember the Super Avengers that everybody wanted? They were selling, retail was like $3,600, and just, it was a fad, if you will, that passed very, very quickly. Now, that doesn't mean you still don't have options in the bigger size watches, right? They still have that as part of their lineup for those that actually prefer that. They didn't do away with them. So like the Super Ocean 46 is still on the menu, if you will, today. But the 48mm pieces are getting discontinued. Breitling is certainly getting away from that because they're realizing that's just not it anymore. If the trend changes, I'm sure Breitling will be ahead of the curve and will be right there to serve you up 48 or 50mm watches. But for now, Breitling started paying attention more to their 36mm models, which sell like hotcakes. Another important fact to mention is that in 2017, CVC Capital Partners bought a major stake in Breitling. And although if you look at private equity firms buying up watch companies, the track record is complete and utter, what's the popular word? I'm like, shit. This was actually a huge success story for Breitling. From 2022 to 2024, Breitling has doubled their turnover. That's huge. In 2 years' time to double your turnover, that's absolutely amazing. And they did it by continually making their classy releases, like the Premier, for example, all while keeping the DNA of the design that actually made them famous. And to be honest with you, I see no reason to believe that their success is going to continue. Again, it's going to be that race. Breitling, Cartier, Omega, Tudor. Bulgari is on this list, and rightfully so. Oh my God, they've come a long way. The Octa design that Gerald Genta originally came up with is what propelled this brand to levels where people are often looking to a Bulgari chronograph because they have the same fate of Cartier. Bulgari is looked at as a jewelry company, and I think them making the move of buying Daniel Roth and buying Gerald Genta was a huge moving part. Now, initially when they bought him over, they were sort of taking Gerald Genta watches and just slapping the Bulgari name on it while keeping Gerald Genta name on there, which I admired a lot. But in 2014, they came into their own world by debuting the Octa Finissimo line. 2014 was the biggest year for them because ever since then, they never really looked back. Price-wise, they're super competitive. If you go out in the pre-owned market, you can buy a nice Bulgari Octa around that $5,000 price range, and buyers love that. That goes in line with Omega. Bulgari has decent retention value when it comes to their Octa Finissimo line, but their regular Octa line, not the thinner ones, I guess, for lack of better terms, they still, not up there in terms of value retention, but buyers are not overlooking the fact that you can buy a nice Octa out there today on the secondary for around that $5,000 price range, whether you're looking at an automatic or perhaps a chronograph. Of course, let's not forget the world's thinnest tourbillon in the Octa Finissimo line until Richard Mille said, hold my beer, and beat him by a half a hair. They're also staying true to their heritage. Like, for example, the Bulgari and the Bulgari aluminum lines were super popular in the 90s, and they're still producing them until this day, again, in quantities that they know the market can absorb because there are still plenty of buyers for those traditional lines as well. But overall, I think Bulgari has improved tremendously well, and I attributed most of it to the Octa Finissimo line. So let's talk about TAG Heuer. Are they a fashion brand watch, are they a lower end watch, or are they a high-end brand? And that's the fight that goes on at TAG Heuer till this day. Now, while they haven't entirely abandoned the whole quartz watch situation, right? Most recent, the Kith collab, right? Or the remake of, I should say. They are strongly concentrating on Carrera and the Monaco lines. Look at the glass box crystals on the Carrera chronographs. Those things are absolutely amazing, and the public loves them. Let's look at the current generation Aqua Racers. They look a lot more balanced than the old ones. And let's not forget that when it comes to their chronograph, TAG Heuer uses mostly in-house movements. How about a $138,000 in-house split-second chronograph they recently came out with? That's not a small feat, and certainly puts you up there in the echelon, well, at least when you price it that much. Still on the fence about that one, but certainly puts it in the echelon of bona fide horology house. All in all, last 15 years have been huge for TAG Heuer, as it was for the previous 4 brands that I had just mentioned. One can argue maybe some other brands belong in that list, and guys, feel free to comment below. Again, remember, this is just my opinion. But of course, there are some mentions that we should talk about outside of the top 5. First one that comes to mind is Grand Seiko. They didn't even enter the US market until 2010, and they're killing it in the United States right now, so certainly worthy of a mention. How about some of the fashion brands? Guys like Hermes, guys like Ralph Lauren, guys like Louis Vuitton, guys like Chanel. They all made a pretty huge transition from afterthoughts quartz watches to now legitimate high-end watchmaking pieces, right? So again, I wanted to mention those as well, but as I said, this is an open forum. You guys comment below, you let me know your thoughts. Other than that, as always, I ask you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel if you're not a subscriber, and I will see you on the next one.